At 7:10 p.m. on November 10th, 1975, the last voice anyone ever heard from the Edmund Fitzgerald crackled through the radio and said, "We are holding our own." 10 minutes later, the largest ship ever to sink on the Great Lakes, all 729 feet of her, vanished without a single distress call. No mayday, no screaming, no warning. She was just gone. No bodies were ever recovered, no one survived, and to this day, nobody can say with absolute certainty what killed her. This is the story of the Edmund Fitzgerald and the mystery that has haunted the Great Lakes for nearly 50 years.
Before we talk about the ship, we need to talk about the water she sailed on, because most people completely underestimate the Great Lakes. These are not peaceful little ponds on a map. These are inland seas. They hold 20% of the entire world's fresh water, and Lake Superior alone, the one our story takes place on, is so vast it could swallow the other 4 Great Lakes inside it. 350 miles wide, 160 miles long, over 1,300 feet deep in places. But here's the number that should stop you cold. Between 1875 and 1975, just 100 years, an estimated 6,000 ships sank on these lakes. Nearly 30,000 sailors died. That's roughly 1 death every single day for a century. Bacon, author of The Gales of November, estimates that between 1875 and 1975, a total of 6,000 commercial wrecks killed roughly 30,000 mariners, which amounts to about 1 death per day for 100 years. November is the cruelest month. Arctic air collides with warm, wet systems from the south. The storms don't build slowly, they explode. Sailors call them the gales of November. And every mariner worth his salt knows, don't get caught on the open lake when November turns angry. The Great Lakes had already taken plenty of great ships, but on the 10th of November 1975, it would claim its most famous victim.
On February 1st, 1957, the Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company placed the order for the most ambitious ship ever built on the Great Lakes. She would be called the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, named after the company's president, a man whose grandfather and 5 brothers had all been Great Lakes mariners. The specs were staggering: 729 feet long, 75 feet wide, powered by steam turbines driving her at 14 knots. She weighed over 13,600 tons and could haul more than 26,000 tons of cargo. When she was launched in June of 1958, around 10,000 people lined the piers and rooftops to watch, and immediately, the bad omens began. When Edmund Fitzgerald's wife, Elizabeth, stepped forward to break the ceremonial champagne bottle across the bow, it took 3 tries. The ship then slid down the slipway at a terrifying angle, righted herself, and sent a massive wave slamming into the opposite pier. A man in the crowd had a heart attack and died on the spot. Any old mariner will tell you, a bad christening means bad luck for the life of the ship. But the company pressed on. The Fitz was outfitted with the finest navigation equipment, top-of-the-line communications, and crew quarters described as lavish: deep pile carpeting, air-conditioned staterooms, leather recliners, panoramic windows looking out over the lake. In 1964, the Fitzgerald became the first ship on the Great Lakes to carry more than 1 million tons of ore through the Soo Locks in a single season. By the time of her final voyage, the Fitzgerald had longed over 1 million miles, the equivalent of 44 trips around the world. She wasn't just a freighter, she was a folk icon. November 9th, 1975. Burlington Northern Railroad, Dock Number 1, Superior, Wisconsin. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the Fitzgerald hauled in her lines for the last time. Her hold was packed with 26,116 long tons of taconite, marble-sized iron ore pellets, bound for the steel mills near Detroit. Standing on the breakwater was a woman named Janice Armagost. She was hoping to catch a glimpse of her husband, Michael, the ship's third mate. She didn't see him. She yelled to a passing deckhand. He called back that Mike was below deck. Janice Armagost would be the last person to see any of the Fitzgerald's crew alive. At the helm was Captain Ernest McSorley. By late 1975, the 63-year-old captain was ready to retire. He had been sailing for more than 40 years, and now his wife Nellie was in poor health. After the Fitzgerald met its quota for the season, McSorley would receive a bonus for any additional cargo delivered. He hoped one final voyage would cover the cost of Nellie's care. Miles behind, following a parallel course, was the freighter Arthur M. Anderson, captained by Jesse Bernie Cooper, a veteran just as seasoned as McSorley. At 7 p.m. on the 9th, the National Weather Service issued a gale warning for Lake Superior. By 2 a.m., it had been upgraded to a full storm warning. The two captains got on the radio. They agreed to change course, take the northern route, hugging the Canadian shoreline for shelter. The sensible call. But the storm had other plans. Here is something that makes this tragedy even harder to accept. A captain on another ship, the Wilfred Sykes, had been tracking this exact storm system since November 8th. He concluded it would pass across eastern Lake Superior and chose a protected route, eventually anchoring in Thunder Bay, Ontario, to wait it out. Based on the NWS forecast, the Arthur M. Anderson and Edmund Fitzgerald instead started their trip across Lake Superior after the regular Lake Carriers Association route, which placed them directly in the path of the storm. In 2005, after running computer models using actual meteorological data from November 10th, the NWS concluded that the Fitzgerald ended up in precisely the wrong place at the absolute worst time. By the afternoon of November 10th, the storm had become catastrophic. At its peak, winds reached 70 to 75 knots and waves swelled to heights of 25 feet. And then, at around 3:30 p.m., the first alarm. Captain McSorley's voice came over the radio. He stated the Fitzgerald had a bad list, had lost both radars, and was taking heavy seas over the deck, one of the worst seas he had ever encountered. He asked the Anderson to guide him using their radar. His ship was now sailing completely blind through a raging storm. Here is where the mystery cuts deepest. Captain Cooper on the Anderson was watching the Fitzgerald on radar, and what he saw alarmed him. Captain Cooper maintained that he watched the Fitzgerald pass far too close to 6 Fathom Shoal to the north of Caribou Island. He could clearly see the ship and the beacon on Caribou on his radar set and could measure the distance between them. He and his officers watched the Fitzgerald pass right over the dangerous area of shallow water. 6 fathoms is 36 feet. The Fitzgerald's draft was 26 feet. In calm water, fine, but plunging into a 15 to 25-foot wave trough, the keel could have come within feet of the lake bottom. A top nautical investigator hired by the ship operator's parent company reportedly told colleagues he discovered scrape marks and the freighter's distinctive maroon paint on 6 Fathom Shoal. A grounding would have been undetectable, swallowed by the constant violence of the waves, but the damage below the waterline, silent, invisible, and completely fatal.
Captain Cooper later said in a videotaped conversation that he always believed McSorley knew something serious had happened as the ship passed over Caribou Shoal, and that from that point on, McSorley knew he was sinking. By 7 p.m., the Fitzgerald was 10 miles ahead of the Anderson. Whitefish Bay, safety, was less than an hour away. Between 6:30 and 6:55 p.m., two enormous back-to-back waves engulfed the Anderson, plunging its bow momentarily into the sea. These two massive waves were headed toward the Fitzgerald. At 7:10 p.m., the Anderson's mate called the Fitzgerald for a routine position check. He relayed that a northbound ship would pass safely to the west. Then, almost as an afterthought, he asked, "By the way, how are you making out with your problems?" McSorley's answer was calm, measured, professional. "We are holding our own." The mate signed off. "Okay, fine. I'll be talking to you later." There was no later. 10 minutes later, the Anderson's radar showed 3 contacts, 3 northbound freighters. The Edmund Fitzgerald was gone. Without witnesses or survivors, whatever the final sequence of events, it is evident that the end was so rapid and catastrophic that there was no time to warn the crew, attempt to launch lifeboats, don jackets, or even make a distress call. Cooper sounded the alarm immediately. The Coast Guard scrambled helicopters, cutters, and aircraft from Traverse City, Duluth, and Sault Ste. Marie. They asked the Anderson to turn back into the storm to help search. Without hesitation, they did. The lake gave nothing back alive. The first debris came the next morning. Pieces of lifeboats, life jackets, air tanks. The lifeboats showed they had been ripped from their cradles, not launched. No one had time to try. Lake Superior is so cold that bacteria often doesn't grow in submerged bodies, leaving them motionless beneath the waves. The 29 men who died in the Fitzgerald are likely all still inside the wreckage. Gordon Lightfoot captured this in his 1976 song, "Lake Superior never gives up her dead." That line is not poetry, it is science. In May 1976, the Navy used an unmanned submersible to capture images of the wreckage, resting some 500 feet below the surface. Photos showed the stern of the ship, the words Edmund Fitzgerald still visible, upside down on the lakebed. The bow sat upright, flat on its keel. Between them, a massive debris field. The middle section had been utterly destroyed. In 1994, businessman Fred Shannon organized 7 dives to the site. In his video footage included an image of a crewman who appeared to be wearing a life jacket, lying on his back near the bow, face turned upward toward the surface. He was never identified. The official Coast Guard report maintained that the most probable cause was the loss of buoyancy resulting from massive flooding of the cargo hold through ineffective hatch closures as boarding seas rolled along the spar deck. The hatch covers were not sealed properly and therefore not watertight, allowing water to enter the cargo areas. Once water entered, it could migrate throughout the hold, much like a sponge. Critics note the ship would have sunk over hours, but the Fitzgerald vanished in minutes. After reviewing testimony that the Fitzgerald had passed near shoals north of Caribou Island, the USCG investigation noted that the NTSB investigators found the Fitzgerald's earlier groundings could have caused undetected damage that led to major structural failure during the storm, since Great Lakes vessels were normally dry docked for inspection only once every 5 years. A cracked underwater hull is silent and invisible from the bridge,
until it isn't.
On the Great Lakes, waves are sharp and pointy, not the rolling swells of the open ocean. Two back-to-back monster waves, possibly the same pair that nearly swamped the Anderson moments before, may have created enough stress to snap the hull apart in seconds. Naval architects have modeled this scenario and found it entirely plausible. Most experts today believe the answer is likely a combination of all three: a ship already wounded, quietly taking on water, and then finished off by waves of extraordinary violence in the worst possible place at the worst possible moment.
Following pressure from the families of the 29 crewmen who perished, the wreck was declared a protected grave site under the Ontario Heritage Act in 2006. Anyone diving to the wreckage without permission faces a fine of up to 1 million Canadian dollars. The families asked for that. The sinking led to changes in Great Lakes shipping regulations that included mandatory survival suits, depth finders, positioning systems, increased freeboard, and more frequent inspection of vessels. 29 men died so future sailors could live. And still, after years of investigations, lawsuits, books, documentaries, Navy dives, and a song that reached the top of the charts, we do not truly know what happened in those final 10 minutes. We don't know what McSorley saw out that bridge window. We don't know if the crew felt it coming. We don't know if there was a single terrible moment of realization, or if it happened so fast that there was simply nothing at all. All we have are 5 words. We are holding our own. And then, silence. The lake took them, and by law and by cold, it will keep them forever.